Right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this discussion, which will be around our latest report, Drivers of Global Change, Responding to East Asian Economic and Institutional Innovation. It is a report published by our institute, T.wai, the Torino World Affairs Institute, and it features the contributions of 11 prominent international scholars on East Asian economic and institutional innovation. Today we have some special guests, Gong Xue, which is also an author of the report, and Mingjiang, which are both faculty members of Nanyang Technological University of Singapore. They will be introduced and chaired by our Giuseppe Gabusi from T.wai and the Università di Torino. So I will now leave the floor to Giuseppe. Giuseppe, please.
Thank you, Francesco, for hosting this event, for making it possible. I'm really pleased and honored to be today online with two friends and colleagues from Nanyang Technological University in Singapore, Professor Gong Xue and Professor Mingjiang. Xue is assistant professor and deputy coordinator of the IP program at RSIS, the Rajatnam School of International Studies at Nanyang Technological University. And within the same school, Professor Mingjiang is associate and provost's chair in IR. What we are discussing today is our latest report on East Asian innovations, institutional and economic innovations. As you know, the book came out basically last summer, and the title, Drivers of Global Change, basically means that we had a focus on several drivers of change in the global order. Everyone would agree that the liberal order is in flux, is changing for a variety of reasons. And of course, the pandemic has also been accelerating these changes. Like it or not, there are changes. These changes are driven by a new perspective on state-market relations. These changes are due to digital money, climate change impact, development finance, global value chains, non-traditional security, and also regional institutions are changing in the Asia-Pacific, or call it Indo-Pacific, or call it East Asia. But in any case, the geographical region of East Asia. These changes require a response from the rest of us, meaning from the actors outside the region. Responding to such transformational challenges in East Asia is really the task of our time. East Asia is the region to watch, not only because it contains the world's most dynamic economies, but also because the combined rise and the systemic innovation necessitate new reflections on governance at all levels, from local to global. And otherwise, we are going to face critical junctures, critical challenges that would, in a sense, impinge upon the idea that the 21st century will be a peaceful and prosperous century. So we have to address these issues, and we have to find a way to construct, to build a new global governance which would make sense for a world which is so different from the world of the 20th century. In this couple of days, we just had the G20 in Rome, then we are now having the COP26 in Glasgow. And as our Prime Minister Mario Draghi was saying in Rome, nobody is able to solve all the complex issues of our time by standing alone and without engaging with other partners. So multilateralism has always been the cornerstone also of the Italian foreign policy. What does it mean? How can multilateralism work in the 21st century? And how different actors, companies, states, NGOs, regional institutions should be engaged in this new efforts, and how is how are the Sino-American tensions impacting on these efforts? Are we going to see a decoupling? Is the Cold War insecurity going to create problems in economic terms, or will companies be able to do business with everyone, no matter what is going on in the security realm? So these are the issues that we addressed. And of course, coming from Europe, we always have in mind the European Union as a possible actor which has to engage in East Asia. The European Union has just published its own Indo-Pacific strategy. The European Union is very active in FTAs, in trade liberalization. On some aspects, the European Union wants to work with China, like for instance, climate change and also the WTO reforms. On other aspects, the relationship is crucially more complicated, which is complicated also by the new assertive posture of China with the Belt and Road Initiative in South China Sea, in Africa, in development finance, and so on and so forth. So the purpose today is really to discuss with our colleagues and the audience their view on the book and on the topics that we have been dealing with in the report. Gong Xue has been one of these 11 authors that Francesco was mentioning, so we will start from Gong Xue with her views on development finance and also some comments in general on the book, and then we will hear from Professor Li Mingjiang his own views, his own maybe also critiques or his own ideas or suggestions for the future, because of course these drivers of global change is meant to be the start of an ongoing discussion in IR and in international political economy, which will involve more and more scholars and colleagues in the future. So in a new version of the report, maybe years ahead, we will be very happy also to host a contribution from Professor Li. Who knows if, of course, he feels like, and maybe one day we could also, gather in Singapore. I do miss Singapore a lot, I would say, and I do miss, traveling, and because technology is okay for these things. It's fantastic and gives us many new opportunities, but people-to-people exchanges, real people-to-people exchanges, is really something different, because it creates also the interpersonal bonds which are necessary to work in depth on crucial issues of our time, like this. So again, thank you very much for joining us. And I would start from Gong Xue introducing her arguments. Thank you, Xue, and over to you.
Sure, thank you. All right. A very good morning and good evening to those watching our live stream discussion on the report, Drivers of Global Change, led by Professor Gabusi. First of all, I would like to thank Professor Gabusi for putting this together again. Like our intellectual community benefited much from the connections that he has created for all of us. And I would like to express my gratitude to T.wai for the support and making this happen. I am very, very honored to be part of this great Asia Pacific report project. This report, as Giuseppe just mentioned, that covers topics, a very wide range of topics such as economic, statecraft in East Asia, digital currency, climate change, etc., by esteemed IP scholars like T.J. Pempel, Gregory Ching, and so on. So I'm very, very much look forward to the discussion on these topics. But as a start, I'm going to open the discussion by briefly presenting a paper that I contributed to this report. So I use China's launch of the white paper on China's International Development Corporation as an example, a case to analyze what drives the modification or the changes of China's vision and role in international development cooperation, and how different it is, and what are the implications for the East Asian region. So earlier this year, Beijing released the third white paper on China's International Development Cooperation, the third one just right after 2011 and 2014. So my question is, what drives China to issue the paper after 7 years? It is a long, period if you think about it. Many analysts, like myself, we consider it as a direct response to the increasing or the mounting doubts, pushbacks resulting from China's past few years' economic activities through the flagship Belt and Road Initiative. And we've heard about narratives, and most of them are quite, negative ones in Western media that label China's BRI as predatory, nature and implementing debt trap diplomacy. So this kind of negative meme actually has led a few BI participating countries in the region, such as Myanmar and Malaysia, to rethink about their economic engagement with China. So based on these anecdotes, I would like to argue that Beijing aims to address these international doubts and queries on issues like transparency and China's dominance on these projects. But more importantly, this white paper comes right at time to show that Beijing also aspires to achieve two major goals. One is to continue with international engagement and integration to serve both domestic and international market. And the second is to set Chinese standards in these overseas development projects. So what is different now? First of all, China obviously shifted the keywords from foreign aids to international development cooperation. And the latter is framed as an internationally familiar the wording to show that China attempts to standardize some of the practices with international ones. And it also shows that China tries to depart from the unilateral assistance, unilateral giving to bilateral and even tripartite cooperation under the multilateral arrangements. In terms of sectors, it's very obvious that the white paper does not only emphasize on the physical infrastructure, the ones that China has been keen on, but also on some soft infrastructure like global health governance as one of the chapters in the report with regards to China's activities in COVID-19. And the second, the paper highlights that highlights Beijing's aspiration to uphold justice and pursue shared interests to downplay China's negative image, the mercantilist image. While calling for shared interests is not uncommon in China's economic diplomacy, upholding the justice implies that China as a developing country has a strong sense of obligation to reform the global governance architecture. And following that, China basically anchored its role within the South-South cooperation narrative, a very different role from the North-South cooperation. And next is China also obviously reaffirms its commitment to quality, transparency, and accountability by pledging to a variety of measurements. Along with the white paper is the establishment of the International Development Cooperation Agency, which launched measurements of China's foreign aids and assistance. So these kind of reforms all aims to institutionalize and streamline the project operation in order to maintain or in order to achieve the efficiency. And the second last point I want to highlight is the paper shows that the principle of ownership of development priorities by host country and developing countries is a change or a departure from for Beijing, from dominating the projects to ensure that the local economies eventually become self-sustaining. Last but not least is the BRI now is reframed as a development public good. And I always said to in a discussion that in the past, Beijing emphasized that BRI is not about foreign aids. BRI is not about unilateral giving. It is a win-win commerce-based vision of mutual economic cooperation. But now the modification explicitly shows that China not only hopes to balance the prevailing narrative that BRI is an instrument of China's ambition, but also to show that China is not gonna overstretch. It has some boundaries to observe. And what could be the possible impacts? First, the institutional reforms is believed or are believed to lead to a gradual improvement in China's overseas sustainability performance, especially in corruption, in the clean energy or biodiversity protection, among other issues. And the second is the return of project ownership to host country will promote fairer competition for local procurement and supplies. And this is actually happening on the ground. I give you one example that China provides special funds to support the local SMEs in the Mekong countries just to ensure that the Chinese companies are not going to dominate the procurement. So they give these sayings to the local procurement and local suppliers. And third, China is very keen on multilateralism in global development causes, such as providing earmarked aids in, for example, the WHO. And last but not least is the white paper declares that China's international development cooperation serves both domestic economy and the foreign policy equally. While we understand such modification speaks to the domestic audience to assure that China will spend the money more wisely overseas, it also shows Beijing will export its standards, experiences, and technologies through those international development cooperation. And one of the most prominent example is the Chinese companies using the Beidou satellite in helping developing countries like Cambodia to design the national grid and road, as well as the dam operation. So despite these, the mentioned above, I would like to argue that a fundamental change in China's international development cooperation behavior is unlikely to take place, or at least a model that resembles OECD is definitely not going to happen. I have the following reasons. First, China still struggles to accept some international standards. For instance, the free, prior, informed consent principle set by the International Finance Corporation that requires public engagement and consultation with the community. The Chinese companies overseas, either in investments or in the foreign aid projects, they have been criticized a lot on lacking such, implementing such principle. And in fact, the white paper does not really give much attention to cooperation with non-state actors overseas or with its own domestic non-state actors. And the second is the white paper also hasn't clarified the already existing confusion over, the concepts between the justice and interests. So there still exists the blurry boundary between development financing, commercial financing, foreign aid assistance. So eventually projects on the ground will be left to the implementers, usually the Chinese SOEs that also seek profits on the ground to interpret how to balance justice and interests. As the largest developing country, China actually, for the past few decades, has offered many good lessons based on its own development experiences. And in terms of overseas development financing, Beijing has been working through local actors, local institutions, by adapting and somehow assimilating the local norms and practices, something that developed countries may have overlooked throughout the course. And this is why Chinese overseas development projects are popular among developing countries. But for Beijing, China's unique belief in do as what Rome does in overseas settings can also be easily misinterpreted, given its past decades experiences in Africa, in East Asia, in or other parts of developing countries. The politics in the local economies can distort China's good intentions and its constructive role in the regional development courses. For example, there's a widespread boycott against Chinese infrastructure projects in Myanmar, especially after the coup d'etat this February. So the politics, again, as I emphasize here, can intensify these already existing negative labels of Chinese projects. And with the rising rivalry and tensions between China and United States in the region, it is expected that we will see a more ideational and narrative competition in East Asia. But development cooperation through multilateral mechanism is believed to be a good start to depoliticize tensions, both for China and its competitors. Just like how China led Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank has demonstrated its image to the world. So I shall stop here, and I look forward to the discussion, as I just mentioned, and not just exclusively on my topic, but also on the topics that are included in the report. I look forward to that. And over to you, Professor Gabusi. Thank you.
Thank you, Xue. Of course, as we were saying, this idea of China being able to construct a new narrative without challenging the liberal economic order per se is really one of the main focuses of our venture, of our book. Because, of course, the Cold War logic is based on the idea that you could say it's black or white. You could say it's either directly challenging the liberal order, or buying the liberal order as such and joining the liberal order as such. And as we know, the world now is too complex to consider the idea that you can decouple, you can, challenge, you can directly challenge everything, from climate change to global value chains to development finance. So that's why we need to have a closer look at the picture to see if there is something which can work despite these tensions. And the idea that China is learning from its own mistakes on development finance tells you the story of the fact that the narrative, the standards of the liberal order are not refused as such by China, but are mainly are being rearticulated in a way which is more in tune with China's national interest. And this could also, of course, have positive or negative consequences depending on the situation on the ground in developing countries. So thank you very much. And now we'll be moving to Professor Di Mingjiang. Mingjiang, thank you for joining us again. And so we are looking forward to hearing your comments and perspectives on the report. Thank you, and the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Gabusi. And hello, everyone, and our friends online. It's good to meet virtually, all of you. I read the report, and it's actually edited a book with great interest. I'm a non-author. I'm not part of this project. So thanks again for inviting me and giving this opportunity. You're actually encouraging to read the whole book, with details. So I'm sort of like outsider of this project, and that really puts me at an advantageous position to evaluate the whole project and the book from different, various angles. And I hope what I'm going to share with everyone here will help persuade readers or audience in this event today to buy the book. Well, let me start by saying that this book is really unique. It's unique in the sense that, we know there are many books and many academic products, so to speak, that try to highlight the importance of Asia in a global context. Right? There are numerous books that have said, Asia is rising economically, it's building its power, right? It's going to be the engine of global development, and given its growing might, it will shape regional order, etc., etc. So a lot of existing works have focused on the economic power, and of course other elements of power as well, of Asian countries. But what distinguishes this book from all these existing works is the fact that this book tries to dig deeper and try to look at some of the things that we can look at to explain Asian economic growth and the accumulation of Asian power. Right. So their colleagues in this project have been looking at two major things, right? The economic new initiatives, new economic policies, and also institutional innovations. So in this sense, this book is really unique, and it's a very, very new and significant contribution to our understanding of the influence of Asian countries and Asia as a region on the global level. So that's really something commendable for this book. And if you have a chance to read this book, you will notice that each chapter has its value. Each chapter looks at one particular issue, and each author tries to look at the impact of that particular policy issue or that specific country on global order, right? And if you read the book, you'll notice that there are there's a lot of detailed discussion on the impacts of economic initiatives, institutional innovations in Asia on possible changes in the world at the global level. And the book is China focused. I think they should not be surprised to many of us, because if you talk about Asia, indeed, a lot of things will have to be related to China, right? So China is discussed in great length, China's political economy, China's monetary policy, the new electronic currency, development finance. We just heard from Dr. Gong, and also China's climate change policy, China's global role in health governance, etc. So it's a lot of focus on China, which I think it's good in a sense. But just a side point here, I think it's a bit too much focus on China in my view. If we can focus a bit on Japan, well, I'm not sure whether we would like to bring in India. The geographic definition of East Asia is in flux, and some people say that India is actually East Asian country. But in any case, there are good justifications to focus on China, but I would say a bit of diversification to focus a bit more on other major economic players in Asia will also be good. Now, a lot of discussions in the book are really significant. You read each chapter, you can see very clear new contribution. For instance, because of time constraint, I'm not going to get into the details of each chapter, but just give you some examples here. For instance, the first chapter by Sean Breslin, right? He talks about the impact of China's illiberal political economy, the domestic structure, how this feature and this characteristic of China's domestic economy is going to have an impact or may drive possible changes at the global level. And we have a chapter on China's digital currency. And I'm sure if you've been studying financial issues, this is a entirely new area, and China appears to be a leading player in this particular area. And then certainly that's going to have a lot of implications for global financial system, right? Again, I will omit these detailed comments about these chapters, but let me move to some of my personal views. And of course, we understand, in any project, any edited volume just cannot address all issues, right? You cannot even address all the major, most important issues. But just a personal thought here. If Professor Gabusi and other colleagues are interested in continuing this project, right? If you wanted to work on follow-up projects similar to the theme of this project, I would suggest a few things. And I believe these additional angles or topics will be equally important, interesting to such academic effort, to try to figure out the importance of Asian economies for the world. First, I think it would be interesting to talk a bit more about the CPTPP, the comprehensive, progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership. I'm sure many of us know what this means, right? It's a regional free trade arrangement that many people believe is a golden standard that demonstrates golden standards. It is one of the most advanced, highest level free trade agreements in the world. And now we have quite a number of countries who are members of the CPTPP, and you also know that China has officially submitted its application to become a member of CPTPP. You may have a few other regional countries or economies who may follow up China's step. So CPTPP is poised to expand its membership, right? And that will make a difference for Asia and Asia Pacific. If you relate what's happening to CPTPP to the ongoing debates about global trade regime reforms, WTO reforms, I think the significance could be really highlighted. Whether in the coming years WTO reform negotiations would make some references to CPTPP, would borrow certain aspects of the CPTPP. I think that would be very interesting. In that sense, CPTPP is indeed a very significant and a driving force for global change, right? And in this edited book, we have a chapter on digital economy, actually on Chinese digital currency. But I would say, a study on the growth of digital economy in Asia would be really good. And also, we can include the different national governance regimes, right, in different countries in Asia in terms of dealing with this exponential growth of digital economy. And that would be really interesting. And one particular issue in this regard is digital trade agreement, right? We have a small-scale digital trade agreement involving Singapore, New Zealand, and other countries. And now both China and South Korea have shown interest to join this digital trade agreement, right? Whether the expansion of this currently small-scale digital trade agreement will get expanded, right? If it is expanded, how will some of the rules and norms that we see in this agreement could be replicated in other regions, even at the global level? And that will be a clear issue that may have some global impacts. And the third issue that I can think of is high tech, the high tech sector, for instance, right? We have this rhetoric from US and a few other countries, Western countries, talking about decoupling with China in the high-tech sector. But what we do not know sufficiently is how other Asian countries are reacting to this high-tech rivalry between China and a few Western countries. Right? If China is successful in binding all other Asian countries and continue to work with other Asian countries in the high-tech sector, that will help alleviate the pressures on China, right? You may see some sort of like regional integration, regional cooperation on high-tech involving China and other Asian countries. So I think the high-tech sector would be really interesting. Now, my last point. I'm not an IPE person. I don't work on like economics and trade issues. My specialty is really international politics, international security, and geopolitics. So I will make an argument here that when we talk about all these things, right? Whether it's BRI, development finance, or non-traditional security, or some of the institutional reforms led by ASEAN, there's always this backdrop of geopolitics, right? Geopolitics plays a very important role. I'm not sure I can use the word decisive role, but certainly it's a very important role. Right? And when we talk about all this, for instance, you look at BRI, right? Because of China's this massive initiative, we're seeing now quite significant, interesting reactions from other major actors, the US, Japan, and now even EU. They've been trying to come up with alternative initiatives or strategies to compete with China's BRI. So supply chain, value chain is another example, right? It's a lot of impacts by geopolitics. So so in a case, saying adding this additional list of additional topics does not mean that this project is insufficient. As I said, any project has to stop at somewhere, right? You can only include a certain number of issues and topics. For this project, I think it's really fantastic. But what I'm trying to say is that if colleagues are interested in continuing this sort of study, this exploration, perhaps that we could look at some of the additional and new topics. Thank you very much. Back to you, Professor Gabusi.
Thank you, Professor Lee. And I think, of course, that the very fact that you are suggesting a future for our project means that you have been liking the project, and so no worries at all. And we are really, really grateful that you could suggest us such important topics for a kind of drivers of global change 2.0. First of all, I would just like to remind the audience that the book is freely available on our website, so you can download the PDF from our website. Actually, I have one of the few the paper copy you can see. Maybe you can see here a few paper copies. We printed them for our circle in Turin and in Italy, but of course the global audience can freely download the ebook from our website. And of course, trying to say something on your comments, Mingjiang. Of course, there is a focus on China because we for this project. We think that China is the real actor which is innovating the most, of course, for its dimension, for its importance in the global economy. So, of course, China is able to reshape narratives, to reshape the ideational framework. That's why you find this focus on China, even though we have a couple of chapters on Southeast Asia, for instance, on how Southeast Asian economies are responding to norms and standards coming from the European Union, for instance, or also looking at the weaknesses of ASEAN as a regional venture. But you are right that, of course, because China is innovating, one of the possible responses of the other actors is trying a new innovation, trying to respond to innovation with innovation. And of course, you were right to say that Japan is one of the cases in point, with the Indo-Pacific strategy, with the presence of JICA, the Japanese international cooperation, aid cooperation in Southeast Asia. Japan is very, very active and is shaping narratives in its own ways. And China is looking also at its defense policy. So the defense policy could also change and have profound also economic implications in high tech, in global value chains. So I think you were really right to point out that we should be looking also at other actors. And of course, on CPTPP, there are a couple of chapters on the regional institutions, but they're written by two American scholars, T.J. Pempel and Carla Freeman. And also for this reason, the idea was to look at how the United States was maybe responding the wrong way. So we were looking at CPTPP and RCEP from the American perspective, because America is basically now being left out of all major regional free trade agreements in the region, which is hurting American companies. So it would also be interesting to look at the American companies and their reactions. And on digital economy, on high tech, you are really right that we should be looking at this. Maybe we should think of a possible like joint publication with RSIS. It would be great to pursue this option in the future. I would be very much delighted to go that way. And I think there is meat there is a substance, there is meat for a new project, a new research project. So maybe I don't see any question from the audience, Francesco, if I'm right. So maybe Xue can give us her feedback on what have just been said by Professor Li, and listen to your comments on the entire project as well. Why do you think the project is so important? Why were you happy to join the project?
Sure, and thank you very much, Mingjiang and Giuseppe, for shared with us your thoughts. I would like to highlight a few points. First of all, when we were doing this project, things or what is going on is still evolving. So we couldn't really predict that China overnight suddenly announced to apply for the membership of the CPTPP, although we already sensed the indication, and that was actually implicitly discussed in TJ Penpal's paper regarding the regional integration, regional institutions, and topics like that. And so that is the clarification I want to highlight. And second is what I think the project is very, very significant and very relevant, because what we are looking at actually is laying foundation for the future discussion. I give you an example of a few chapters. One is, as Mingjiang mentioned, about Sean Bresling's China's economic statecraft, and the other is about Greg Chin's U.S. financial statecraft towards China. And you will find about, these days, the popular keywords of describing or defining U.S.-China relations would be focused on weaponized interdependence. And these two keywords anchored pretty much in almost all of our chapters, with the topics that you mentioned about, right? You mentioned about the high tech. We are not really, exclusively covering that, but somehow we try to tell the audience where are the tensions are from and why, the so-called liberal great power tries to create a conflicting vision in contrast to the neoliberalist beliefs about how the world economy should be operating, and why they want such illiberate, for example, economic relations to constrain an illiberate economy like China. So these debates are ongoing, and I have strong belief and confidence in that all of our chapters, regardless of the time issue, it is actually a timeless piece, I have to say, as long as the Sino-US relations are still, undergoing this rivalry, and no matter how it's evolving into Indo-Pacific, or it still remains as the East Asia or Asia Pacific, these topics can be continue to be discussed unless there's a very, very clear, power transition, and that is the other topic that we may work on in the future. So thank you for those suggestions, and I would assume these proposals or suggestions would lay foundation for our second or phase 2 collaboration, I guess, in the future. Yeah.
So thank you, Xue. As you were saying, these pieces are addressing a very, I would say, a very, important issue for our days. So they have a close look at current affairs, so to speak. But as you were saying, they are taking also the long view. They're taking the long view. They are saying, this is the past, and so this is what where we come from. This is the issue that we have to address. There are these developments now, but we should keep the attention going on this, because there will be future involvements, because the issue is going to stay with us for the rest of this century, at least, like climate change impact. If the COP26 is successful or is a failure, this does not prevent the piece by Catherine Morton worth reading, because the issues are still there. And so I think that each topic has, in each chapter has its own values, also for students. I will use the book for my courses on IP and political economy of East Asia, because I think there is food for thought for our students. When it comes, for instance, to digital money, what does it mean for the future? How is the world responding? Is the dollar system over? These issues are addressed by Christopher McNally in his chapter. So I think this is the value in the end of the book. And of course, this was our design, so I'm not a third part of this because I have been editing the volume, but I'm really happy that also Professor Lee thinks it's worth reading. So maybe Professor Lee can have a final remark or final comment on this.
Yeah, sure. I should have made a caveat to say that I'm not a salesperson. I don't sell books. I don't sell anything. But this book is really highly recommended. In addition to students and class readings, which Professor Gabusi just mentioned, I would say it's also very useful for policy makers or people who work in the real policy world. And the chapters actually provide updated observations and also analysis insights on a lot of these issues, economic, institutional issues in Asia. So it should be a very useful reference for people in the policy world. And it's also quite good, I would say, for researchers as well, right? They have, this book really signifies a lot of breakthroughs in my view in terms of research. So I recommend this book to all of you. And this is particularly, it's free, as if I heard it correctly. You can download the whole manuscript and also individual chapters online. So, yeah, congratulations to you.
Thank you, Professor Lee. You were right. The book is really free. We are a think tank. We are a no-profit organization. So we got some funding from the Compagnia di San Paolo Foundation for this, and also the project has been supported also by the Bank of Italy and is made in conjunction with the Department of Cultures, Politics and Society of the University of Turin. So they are all public institutions, and they gave us also the financial support that we need to produce this kind of ebooks. So it's something that we give to the public, really as a public good of reflections, of knowledge, and God knows how much we do need an increasing efforts on knowledge in times where the pandemic is also showing us that there are anti-scientific movements in our own countries which are complicating the issues, the political issues even more. So we did this with the spirit of disseminating knowledge, of reflecting on the present and the future of our complicated times. So I really am happy that people from different countries of the world, from China to the UK, from Canada to the United States, from Malaysia to Australia. Many people contributed to these chapters. So I really would invite the audience to have a close look at the chapter. And if I'm not wrong, there are no questions now. It's also time for a dish of spaghetti in Italy, and so that's why maybe people are not writing any questions. So I myself will have my spaghetti plate in the next 20 minutes or so. So in the meantime, first of all, thank you, Xue, for writing the chapter and believing in us, in our project. And thank you, Professor Lee, for reading our book and for sharing your comments, and also, most of all, for your suggestions on the future. I think there is a space for a future collaboration with all of you on a new version, a new update of the ebook. So thank you very much again, and we close the session here, and keep following us on our social media. So Francesco, you can close the meeting. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Everyone.